existing generation, transmission and distribution facilities from the provisions of NEMA for the duration of the state of disaster. Now, what we are currently doing is that we are looking at developing directions that would enable expedited procedural requirements for requiring environmental authorization. So, for example, allowing a process to be followed that is similar to the current basic assessment process, even for activities that may otherwise require the full scoping EIA process. Shorter periods between the submission of an application and the submission of reports for decision making. So I think that what we're saying is in our EIA section, we would put everything to do with the state of disaster to the front of the queue, ahead of other applications, so that it could be processed faster. And a shortened period, we're also examining a shortened period for public participation, for example, 14 days as opposed to the existing 30 days. Now, you would know that already if something is defined as a strategic infrastructure project, we can cut down the EIA process from 107 days to 57 days. So we're looking at how we could facilitate other environmental processes to be classified in these terms rather than needing the full 107-day process. Now, I think it's important to say that the regulations in themselves do not provide, the current regulations do not provide for exemptions from environmental law, and it's not our intention to start producing blanket exemptions from those provisions. I think what we recognize is that there may be certain instances where this is required, and on a case-by-case basis we would be advised by our legal practitioners how best to deal with that situation so that we shorten the prescribed timeframes for decision making. Let me say at the outset that we have also been participating in the one-stop shop process that already speeds up the provision of assistance and guidance for potential applicants related to authorizations, permits, and licenses required for energy generation, transmission, and distribution. So we already have a situation where we are speeding up those processes under the existing dispensation, and we would only look at bringing in the directions if we felt that the existing processes did not facilitate that. I think it's important to say that solar rooftop installations don't require an environmental authorization. With regard to bigger solar projects, we are still in the process of developing regulations that would allow solar PV facilities and battery storage facilities to go through an expedited registration process, and we will be putting those regulations out for public comment soon, and that of course would be in areas of low environmental sensitivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Chrissy. Can we then, at this point in time, allow Minister Diseases to face the nation from a distance? I hope she's hearing me.
I do hear you, Minister.
Thank you. Oh, I can see her.
No, thank you very much, Minister. Other ministers are on the platform, also in Pretoria with us, and our media and our nation. We have been indeed in engagement with our farming organizations as well as the agribusiness industries to look and assess at the impact of the energy situation in their production. We did that working with structures such as the National Agricultural Marketing Council, BFAB and RBs, where we went around the country and really did a bit of an intense survey so that we can get a sense of where mostly farmers as well as agribusinesses have been impacted upon. Out of that survey, we then started engagements with ESCOM to look at what are the possible short-term measures that can be applied in order to ensure that we ameliorate the problem, particularly to ensure that we avoid the risk of food insecurity in our country. So there has been some short-term interventions that we've looked at that would address areas where there's intensity of production, particularly on the irrigation side and the processing side. With the regulations having been announced, it would assist us to ensure that we do certain interventions that can make it possible for agriculture to continue to operate. Some of those have been looking at off-grid, where some of the investments by agricultural businesses and some large agricultural entities can actually employ such as solar systems and others to be able to continue with production. The second intervention has been to look at where the timings of load shedding, particularly where intensity on irrigation is concentrated, can actually be applied with agreement with those producers in those localities so that you can have maximum time for irrigation at that level. We've also looked at other areas where own production of alternative energy can be supported. We then are currently looking at how we can enhance some of the products that have been announced by Minister of Finance in terms of the intervention that the state can make to assist individual households, but also businesses, some of those which are tax incentives. On our side, we are also looking at how we could look at blended finance to assist upfront such that those who would like to go on alternative energy sources can actually do so immediately. We will be dealing with the detail with the sector as we've been continuously engaging. Minister, without taking much of your time, I think this is how far I can go for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister Tidiza, all the way from George. I'm not sure if we successfully connected Minister Chaveri. We didn't. No, that's fine. Colleagues, it has already been said that because of particular conditions, under the guidance of the Minister of Kokta, Minister Nkosazana Dlamini, the situation had to be classified. Once classified as appropriate for disaster, and then disaster got declared. Having been declared, it meant that particular regulations that are supposed to guide our life under that declarations had to be couched, which are being spread around the country. We're here now to converse with you about them. And a number of other departments will be doing their special basis with regard to what is uniquely happening in their situation. I just wanted to check if Jeff from Treasury is here. Not here yet. Okay, fine. What to do now? You must get a seat. You can't stand there. We need you very much. Thanks, Jeff. So, colleagues, what we're going to do now is time for questions. We converse with you. As you know the rules. What I'm going to ask Nangaba to assist me in. I don't see no one. You're hiding. You're wearing it. You're too dark where you are. To assist me on the list of questions that are supposed to be responded to. Right? We can start We start with Zianda, we follow with Mangoba. Who is up there? Sikofatso? Makula. Zianda, wait a bit, Zianda, Mangoba, Sikofatso, who else? For now, Zianda, shoot.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Minister. It's Zianda Ngobo from Newsroom Africa. I'd like to direct this perhaps to Minister Kumubele, insofar as this statement that has been made by Minister Dlamini Zuma speaking about the lives that have been lost. But there's also, when it comes to exempting, certain facilities. However, there have also been lives that have been lost due to the crime that has taken place as a result of the load shedding. I mean, just by way of an example, just yesterday, there were reports of who killed because they were trying to steal his horse. They stabbed him to death. So that's just the type of life lost as a result of the load shedding. Perhaps how interventions will be able to implement for such sense of
Thank you, Ministers. Good morning. It's Mangoba Mkuno from ENCA. The first question I just wanted to direct possibly to the Minister of Health, just in terms of the timelines that we're looking into. We know that you have identified over 200 facilities that will be exempted, but in terms of the timelines to actually get those that have not been exempted, what sort of timelines are you looking at? What are you hoping for in terms of trying to ensure that those are exempted? And just another question perhaps to the Minister of Cooperative Governance. Are these the only institutions that are exempted at this current stage, or are we looking at other institutions and other possibly infrastructure?
You still have to get the details of the scope of work, which then would need to be done. The procurement of those cables, how long will it take, but the shortest possible time. We would be pleased if at the latest by June, hopefully. I'm speaking just in terms of a wish, not knowing that scope of work, the procurement of the kind of the instruments which will be required, the cables and any other equipment which will be required. But we will be ready by the end of this month with the full costing and business plan, and hopefully they can then be funded, so that at least we'll be looking forward to, at least by June, hopefully the whole of the 213 under the advantage of these emergency conditions, that we can be able to secure them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pasca. Minister Dlamini Zuma.
Thank you very much. I think on the issue of crime, if you look at Regulation 51C, it does talk to security. And so it's up to the minister to then make sure that there are directions that speak to that. I won't say what those directions should be, but obviously even the deployment of security, the police, depending on where there's hotspots and the load shedding is. So he will have to then do that. But the regulations do give them that space, give the security forces that space. Now, when it comes to the issue of the emergency procurement, I think if you recall during COVID, we didn't put this up front. It was a new thing. We didn't put it. It was the real-time audit came much later, afterward learned what had happened. So this time, we decided that it must come up front, so that right from the beginning, the Auditor General must be involved. But also what is even more important is that every month, the accounting officer goes to Parliament, to their portfolio committee, and explain what they've procured, for what, how. So that's how we are trying to stop what happened earlier. And I think that is going to Parliament every month is going to be very helpful, because then people will know that they have to account to the nation, because if you go to Parliament, you're accounting to the nation. And questions will be asked. It won't be just a report, but you'll be there and you'll have to answer questions. So we are hoping that this will assist us. But should there be any problem, you know that, again, learning from what happened during earlier days of COVID, a fusion center was established, which has all the security and the people that can take the cases up. We hope that they won't have to, but should there be a need, the fusion center will also be activated for those. In terms of whether there are other essential infrastructure that will be exempted, I think this is, as you know, this is an ongoing process. The reason we didn't declare earlier was that the hours of load shedding were not as many as they are now, for instance. Now you have places where there are 4 hours at a time. So depending on what happens and what impact is felt in other sectors. For instance, of the NDMC, some of the insurance companies were saying if this continues, they might not insure certain electronic devices or certain electric devices because of the load shedding that might damage them. So it depends on what other areas of other sectors experience and what impact. So I can't at this stage say yes, there'll be more, or no, there won't be more. It will be assessed as we go along, and if there is a need for more, it will be included. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nkosazana. Minister Pasha, there's a gap he wants to close. Mr. Pasha.
No, thanks, Minister. I didn't want Zianda to think I'm avoiding her question. Just missed it about the lives lost. I'm sure she couched it carefully, being aware, hope that so far in terms of the reports we have received in the health facilities, there has not been a very direct link between deaths in facility, whether theaters, ICUs could be linked directly to the breakdown of electricity. I think this is essentially because that's far, despite the high levels of load shedding, most of our facilities, their generators have kicked in immediately, and so far we have not had any report of catastrophic failure of generators. But her question was also outside facilities, because there are people who are on various machines, some of them in terms of oxygen supply, some maybe also in terms of dialysis, and there are all those kind of facilities which people depend on. Unfortunately, in terms of that, from our own reports, it's very difficult to get that unless people come forward, those who are dependent on those kind of support machines. So far, we haven't had people who have come forward and reported. But if and when that does happen, we will be able to communicate that. But fortunately, at this stage, we don't have any reports from people who are depending on this kind of facilities out in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, you'll know that regulations are trying to assist the declaration, that if there's a energy policy, how do you adapt it to the circumstances? If there's procurement, how do you adapt it to circumstances? Can go on and on and on. How do you adapt everything? We're not suspending laws, but we're adapting them to deal with the situation that we're confronted. Even what Zianda has raised, the regulations will guide us issue by issue on how we deal with that, as we are going to be properly legally advised. When is the Minister of Electricity? Very soon. Very soon. Very soon. Very soon. Very soon. I thought I wanted to speak about the issue of AG. And I think this question, Minister Nkosazana, keeps on coming. To me, it's like, you know, remember for some time we're struggling to create net jobs. It's always negative. Remember, there's always job losses, jobs gained, and then we're always getting a negative results. So every time we ask this question, the results were negative. But for the entire last year, the results were positive. That's why we're able to create 1.6 million jobs. But every time you meet people, says, when are you going to start creating jobs? Because they ask the question in terms of 2021. Here, AG worked during COVID, real time. And there were gaps they realized that time. When we went to KZN Zianda, KZN Northwest and Eastern Cape, AG came in there. Based on our records, we're not saying there's nothing. Based on our records, taking into account the huge amount of money that were spent there, we are yet to be told of a scandal. We're not saying it's not there, but different completely from what happened during COVID-19. In other words, the AG's role does what we call work real time, because they were able to show what are the gaps during COVID-19. Thank you very much. Further questions? Maybe online? Anything online? You've got stamina, then we'll come to you before line. Let's check what is online first, and then you will be the first before the line.